This episode is about servers. Well, not people servers or PC servers, but computer servers that serve, the things. Allow me to serve by starting the service with you. Anchor It Up. It is the name of a free-to-play, web-based minigame that may even work on your smartphone. How to play? The link is found in the description below this video. Have a little fun this week and participate in this unusual due diligence in an entirely new way by building your own data center into the clouds. Speaking of fun, let's make some unusual connections.
How so, Poseidon?
Did you know I've been practicing voice acting? I am getting pretty good at it. You might even say I've reached a new level. My skill may know no bounds, well, except those of quality, attention to detail, and accuracy, maybe a few others. Viewer, Poseidon can materialize as a talking milkshake, but also do very good voice work.
It's totally true.
Let's roll because all sorts of unusual things are happening in this episode. For example, do you hang out with Laserbeak in cyberspace in a place called the Twitter? It is totally fine if not, and may even be better for your soul. You see, the place that might sell us pancakes one day, and until then just has hot takes, that place called Twitter, it brings us two gems. Gems that send us on a journey deep into the past. Well, not that deep, but it'll make sense. It starts with this post. Now, when the brilliant genius that brought the world Ethereum publishes a Twitter post about the future being just a conversation about cross-chain or multi-chain, it then dawned on me that this Russian-Canadian programmer that inspired the world was just, and hear me out, just talking about why Anchor is exactly on the right path, the path to the heavens. And yet, on that same day, I stumbled upon a conceivably unrelated story written about an entirely different topic by a completely different author, about how no one in the history of forever has ever wanted to run a server. It then got me thinking about why Anchor holdings need to grow even larger this year.
Anchor up?
Anchor it up indeed. Welcome to Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host, Poseidon, god of the sea, and in today's fresh show, I come to you in the form of this talking milkshake. Grab your Jedi robes as we take an unusual look at Anchor through the lens of history to connect the dots from the distant past into probable futures, and blow up a few Death Stars along the way. Oh, and just maybe we'll meet on the moon together. Let's get started by rolling back in time to the year 1943.
Time warp sound effect.
This is the high quality production you expect, isn't it? Let's talk about the Mark I. The Harvard Mark I is considered to be the first mainframe computer, but also a connective strand of cotton candy magic to the inspiration that became the Iron Man Mark I armor. The Harvard Mark I filled an entire room, and did you know that machine cost around $3 million? That's in current US fiat to build, arguably still cheaper than a PS5. Now, the average consumer retail business wasn't even able to use a computer back in the 1940s, as most were happy to have an NCR cash register. Some of those were even made of cast iron.
Poseidon is trying to hint about the NCR and AMP relationship here. You should probably Google that later. Is this a good way to add a footnote to a video?
Speaking of iron, the comic book-based superhero known as Iron Man first published in 1963, incidentally 20 years after the introduction of the Mark I mainframe. Pretty neat.
Very true. But did you know that while Iron Man was first introduced in the comics in 1963, it was also in 1963 that IBM introduced the first removable computer drive? There's more. 1963 was also the year Bell System introduced the push-button telephone. The same Bell System incubated an infamous technology research group called Bell Labs that nearly invented the entire idea of the internet in 1964. They didn't, so we'd end up waiting till 1994 for it. Sad. Big sad.
That's a great point, actually. Big sad indeed. The internet is an important ingredient to this conversation, but let's take a brief pit stop. Let's go 20 more years from the 1960s to the 80s. What's that? Let us fast forward to the 1980s, since there's a pretty regular theme here on Unusual Due Diligence channel.
Time warp sound effect.
By the 1980s, the personal desktop revolution was in full swing, and those mainframe computers from earlier, you could certainly find terminal access to even better versions, but really we aren't quite there. All we want to do is get when servers started showing up a little bit of everywhere. Let's fast forward a bit more.
Time travel sound effects again.
We need to be in the 1990s. That's 1994 year from earlier is a pretty good year, unless you were a Major League Baseball fan because there is no World Series due to player strike, just so we can really embrace what's about to happen to the era we now refer to as Web 1.0. It began with a dial-up modem, Usenet, AOL, early text-based games, and a free computer if you just install a bit of spyware. For real, it was a strange and weird time. Now, there's a lot of talk about in 1.0, but for our purposes, let's focus on the idea of a data center. A data center? What is that?
Oh, I know. It's where we center the data.
Well, yes, but a bit more than that. A data center facility used to be called the IT closet. That IT closet is where the servers were for, well, the entire company. In the early internet days, in those Web 1.0 days, it wasn't completely unusual to have a company with its own computer server. The company would take their computer servers and store them, often haphazardly, in the closet. Someone, somewhere in this audience, is a network engineer who remembers these days.
Were there problems with this?
All sorts of problems, not just problems like rodents, water, and terrible lighting. Those were generally known. There were less obvious problems, the problems that, unless you knew of someone that's told you the stories, well, stories like walking around a very, very large corporate campus and exploring each and every floor of each and every corporate building, just praying and trying to find all those hidden closets, often in a futile search for the one machine that had the CEO's lost files. In all seriousness, this did and may still happen. It wouldn't surprise me at all to learn there are closets with aged technology that serve some niche function that people have just forgotten about, still running in some building no one knows about. There may even be some poor soul just wandering lost in some large commercial building, trying to figure out which closets hold which servers, completely unaware of the last 30 years.
So you're saying that putting computers in closets to run a server, that didn't work real well?
That's right. And so the next evolution from this is having what's called co-location. In co-location, the service would be moved out of the company IT closet and shifted into typically a space about the size of a small manufacturing plant, managed by another company for a business to store their previously closeted servers. This concept is still done today, but you'd have to really dig to find people who want to do it.
That's because running a server is hard.
Well, in this Web 1.0 model, every company ran their own servers that hosted this new email technology, a web server, a file transfer server to move files around, files that usually contain data like social security numbers and other private information, and even some early custom apps. In today's world, it is unthinkable to have a company without some sort of software behind it. But in Web 0.0, the thinking was the other way around. It was generally unthinkable to have software in many businesses. But those that did were all about this thing called e-business. Well, until Steve Jobs made fun of everyone. There was a time when there wasn't just e-commerce and e-business. There was e-mail, and there was also e-grills, and e-zines, e-mobiles, e-everything. E-ridiculous for those who remember this phase. Along the way, even co-location turned out to be just too much. So those e-businesses everywhere, they just offloaded all the server work to companies like Rackspace and others. Companies that do, well, the very real work of keeping the servers online so those same businesses could continue their pretend play. Those hosting companies would hold the servers, and as a business, you could do something remarkable and just load your software onto those machines, pretend the hosting company wouldn't look at your data, and pretend your customers didn't care. The era of pretend brings us to Web 2.0 and the complete takeover of social media. What bigger pretend is there than all the virtual signaling found in online posting in every website you can find, which is why clearly Poseidon is the most virtuous of them all. After all, would a talking milkshake be wrong?
The milkshake commands, and I obey.
Yes, Poseidon is also a Jedi and has force powers. Wait, this is a Star Wars episode?
This is the way.
This is the way. Okay, now it's just getting weird, but then that's why you come to Unusual Due Diligence. Back to social media and the second web movement, and why ANKR is right where it needs to be to catapult to astronomical new heights in the years to come. You see, in the Web 2.0 moment, there's a big shift that happened. Those servers moved out of data centers co-location and evolved into this new thing called cloud. It wasn't initially called cloud. Early on, it was called utility computing, like power or the water company. People had a general sense it was important. They didn't anticipate the sheer enormity of these new data centers. Utility computing turned into cloud computing because everyone likes clouds.
No one likes utility bills.
The Web 2.0 era brought phenomenal and mind-bending technological capability in these cloud centers. You could attempt to mastermind all the technologies in the cloud, only to learn by the time you reach the end, you've only just begun. But let's talk about them servers. Where are they? Remember, when we started out something called an IT closet, moved to co-location, then turned over all the hosting duties to hosting companies. And so where did those servers go? In the cloud, the servers are in massive facilities, and they look like the interior of the Death Star. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you.
We've only been waiting this whole episode.
Okay, you aren't wrong. Here's what's going on. In Web 2.0, humanity sort of goofed. You see, humanity has accidentally built Death Stars owned and managed by new empires. No, we didn't just do one, we made several. That wasn't really readily apparent until people started asking questions and experiencing the perils of centralization and the dark force power of the shadow ban. Humanity sort of and accidentally allowed the dark side to develop. Let's look at it. Google Cloud, Death Star. Amazon AWS, Death Star. Microsoft Azure, Death Star. Oracle Cloud, Death Star. I believe the collective statement of humanity is, oh, whoops, sorry about that.
Hey, ask them about that subscribe button.
Great call out. Speaking of whoops, did you subscribe and place an anchor on that thumbs up button? It helps Poseidon, you know, the talking milkshake on the screen? Right. It helps Poseidon know what videos you like and which ones he should go back to the drawing board on. I'm improving a little with each video. It's part of growing. What is growth but learning? And as a civilization, we appear to be learning that centralization might be bad. Death Stars, very bad. But anchors, very good. Anchor, Luke Skywalker. Anchor, the chosen one.
Ah, I see what you did there. Very clever.
Enter a new order, or I should say a new decentralized order. Running servers and infrastructure is still something that no one wants to do. But now that the growing consensus is allowing all your mission-critical software and applications to live inside a prison of the Empire, kept there by a policy of fear and within orbit of the Death Star, it is not exactly how one rebuilds after the Death Stars are inevitably blown to bits. Out of those bits are ideas that are, frankly, pretty good. There are ideas I'm noticing anchors picking up and putting into place.
I noticed you noticing.
It's what's on the screen. That's where Anchor is an interesting addition to our story. The Anchor future is bright. It wouldn't surprise me to start seeing Anchor announce corporate deals to help publicly traded companies go online and shift those resources locked up by fear onto the global decentralized and far more economic new order. Humanity might even see a balance of power shift from cloud providers like AWS and Azure compete alongside a new kind of cloud provider, a little upstart called Anchor, as providing the shovels and buckets in the next great gold rush. Hey, that worked for Wells Fargo too, which if you look at it, there's some interesting parallels there.
Did you just link Anchor to Luke Skywalker, Wells Fargo, and the Ethereum founder?
I totally did. It's because the future is as mysterious as a talking milkshake, and there's a lot more that I don't know than do know. But I do know this. This is Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host, the talking milkshake known as Poseidon, god of the sea. In this episode, we linked Anchor into the flow of history and into the future, the chains that keep our anchor secure. Make waves, my friend.